Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to our masterclass of today. As you know, we have a masterclass program this year that every Thursday the last Thursday of every month, we join together here in this wonderful space that gives the technology gives us to have a conversation with someone who is working on something interesting. And today we have the opportunity to have a conversation with Thomas Legrand. And our masterclass of today is entitled Inner Well-Being and Education for Sustainability with Thomas. Our masterclass program is part of our UNESCO Chair on Education for Sustainable Development. And I am here talking to you today from Costa Rica from our Education Center on Education for Sustainable Development that is located here on the campus of the University for Peace. As I was walking in the office just a few minutes ago, I heard the toucans, and I felt they were kind of welcoming me back to Costa Rica and also to our conversation today. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today here. I'm going to start for those of you who haven't written yet, if you could introduce yourself in the chat box with your name, maybe where you work, and where are you located today. So let me start by introducing Thomas. Thomas is a scientist and a sustainability practitioner. He has a PhD in economics, and I actually find it quite interesting that he's also, being an economist, that you are so interested in this topic of inner well-being and how to bring this into our education. I got to know Thomas through his book, the book that Thomas, I think, launched not long ago, is entitled Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm, which was published in 2022. And quite interestingly, a very core idea that is embedded in the preamble of the Earth Charter is an invitation for us to think that when we have finally met the basic needs, the basic human beings' needs, development should be much more, we should envision development as a way to enhance our capacity to be more rather than having more. And of course, Thomas' book addresses that in a beautiful way. But Thomas is also the lead technical advisor for the UNDP, working on this initiative on Conscious Food Systems Alliance, which is, of course, of great interest for all of us. So, Thomas, I would like to, before you start, I would like to invite you to share with us a little bit about you, but also what made you be so interested in this topic of inner well-being in the politics of being. But also, if you could share with us where you are and why are you in this location in France, next to Plum Village. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you very much, Marianne. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you, everyone who is attending today, and it's good to know some faces I know. Yes, so today we'll talk about inner well-being and education for sustainability. I'm very inspired to be part of this masterclass of Earth Charter because, as Miriam said, it has been very influential in my work and this book, Politics of Being. So yeah, I think I will tell a little bit about my story before sharing with you a short mindfulness practice to ground us, and then go into the presentation with including a breakout group and some time for questions and answers, so that we make it very interactive. So I guess this journey of looking inside to find meaning and well-being in life for me started very much some 20 years ago when I did a student exchange in Mexico. And my path happened to cross those of some shamans there. And I was immediately able to recognize that they were offering a path of inner knowledge, exploration, and mastery, which was really the path, a spiritual path I was somehow looking for without having been able to put a name on it until then. And I was coming out of, I grew up in Paris, and I had, you know, a relatively, I would say, very good conditions of living in general. But somehow, and like many, I think, young people, I was also suffering, having difficulties to find meaning in life and to find, you know, my purpose, I guess. So, and this was a starting point for to really make a conscious decision to prioritize my inner journey in my life. And it was really thanks to this meeting these people, it was really a feeling of a profound reconnection to myself, but I would say very much in particular through the connection to Mother Earth. And, you know, for someone having grown in Paris, being able to be in touch with indigenous traditions in Mexico was very enlightening to me, I would say. And because of this reconnection, I decided to shift my studies that I was ending, so that I could really work for sustainability and in particular for Mother Earth. So after finishing my master's degree in international development, when I had a semester left, and I really took additional course to be able to, because as part of that, really, you know, so I decided to shift my studies towards international development so that I could make a positive contribution. And that's, you know, where I experienced myself firsthand, this link between, you know, the inner path, my own well-being, and being able to offer a positive contribution to the world. So let's say sustainability. So I came back to Mexico, where I lived for 3 years after that, and working in the field of microfinance, which was combining what I have studied in terms of management and international development, to learn from these shamans, and but I was really looking for a way to work for nature conservation. And I finally, after that, I worked a bit. I came back to Paris. I worked a bit in management consulting while I was preparing to do a PhD in ecological economics, working on forest conservation in Costa Rica, indeed. And you know, life can be very generous. And as part of doing this PhD study with this research, this field research in Costa Rica, I ended up renting a room to the woman who I'm sharing now my life with, my wife, Emelina Corrales. So I can feel, you know, I've been guided on this journey to and life more and more unfolding as it chooses, as I connect more and more with my own inner self and my purpose. And so this PhD then allowed me the possibility to work in the field of environmental conservation, a lot with UN agencies, for example, but also NGOs and private sector, working on forest conservation. I can feel, you know, when I talked about my reconnection to nature in Mexico, it was really a connection to the forest. And somehow, you know, I thought I wanted to bring a contribution in that field of nature conservation. To me, it somehow it was obvious that it was about the forest, and I grew more and more aware about this deep connection with the forest as I was working on it, but also on climate change, green finance, etc. But I was working on all these subjects, and sometimes at very strategic level, you know, working on the development strategy of some countries, of green development strategies. I found out two things. First is that as an environmentalist, I feel the current development paradigm focused on economic growth is too antagonistic to our environmental agenda. So this makes me realize that we really need to shift these development paradigms. Otherwise, there is little we can achieve within that framework. So that was the first learning I got. The second one is that even at these very strategic assignment, I felt there was never the space to go back to the root causes of our problems and start to ask ourselves deeper questions. And this is why 10 years ago I've started to work on this book, Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm. And I was basically looking for what is a wisdom-based approach, or let's say spiritual approach to development. And I think I found this answer in the Earth Charter, which have been also, this sentence have also been used in the Rio +20 Interreligious Declaration, which says development is about being more. So that was a kind of starting point I found in this reflection. And as the subtitle of this book indicate, I was trying to combine science. Also, my PhD gave me some insights in that direction, and wisdom. So I was indeed very interested in many wisdom traditions, and started to explore a great deal in that, especially those talking about, some teachers talking about this very specific moment we are living, which I think is a moment where we are called to evolve to a different kind of mindset, of culture. And there have been some teaching about the spiritual evolution of humanity, let's say, for example, of Sri Aurobindo, or which to me, and this become more and more the lens through which I was seeing the happening of the world. And but it was not really reflected in the media, in social science, etc. So that's why also I decided to, because to me that lens is very convincing to make sense of what is happening and what is a way forward. And I wanted to, through this book, offer that perspective in a very clear and convincing way, based on science and wisdom. So in 2015, I started to move back to France, to the southwest of France, next to a monastery called Plum Village, which is a monastery of Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. And I will present him maybe more deeply a little bit later today, and some of his teachings on inner well-being. But just to say that it has been very influential in my work, as it very much focused on engaged and applied spirituality. So yeah, and as I was ending finally the writing this book, which was published in 2022, I started this work with the United Nations development program, which is called the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, to which also I will refer to in terms of practical experience on how to implement this agenda and what we can learn from it. So maybe before we, yes, Miriam.
Mention that I find it quite fascinating that you work first, or your interest in that intersection that started from an economic approach, being an economist, but then you expanded in always searching for the intersection of inner well-being and spirituality. And then also you called your book, you brought this notion of politics into your book. So I just wanted to mention how interesting that you, as trained as an economist, has been able to expand and find linkages with the inner and outer world. And you just mentioned something quite interesting for all of us. We normally spend a lot of time looking at current situations, from climate change or or whatever, but without really spending time to dig deeper in the root causes of that. So I think much of what you have been working on help us to dig into these deeper dimensions of what is behind, what is underneath the current challenge we have. So thank you so much again, Thomas, for being here with us to share some of your work, but also how does that link into education. So I really, as you know, wanted to use this opportunity not only for all of us to have a sort of summary of the politics of being book, but also to have a chance to reflect on the implications of that to education. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. I just want to acknowledge that we have people here from Kenya, Japan, Brazil, and also from Florida, where the hurricane is visiting this week. So I just wanted to also acknowledge everybody who are here taking part in this conversation. So Thomas, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. So what I propose is that we have also a taste of what inner well-being may look like by through a short mindfulness meditation, and we'll try to bring that energy with us during this masterclass today. So I invite you to take a comfortable position, well seated with a spine upright, with your feet well grounded on the floor. Take a moment to feel your body. How does my body feel today? We can feel the contact with our seat. With the floor. You can see how our respiration moves our body, our belly, our abdomen. You can feel the contact of our clothes also, on our shoulders, for example. Breathing in, I'm aware of my body. Breathing out, I relax my body. Breathing in, aware of the body. Breathing out, releasing tensions. And there are also some tensions that can't easily release now. And we just smile to them. Just accept them, embrace them. It's okay to be with these tensions. We offer them a space to be there. And we can follow our breathing, being mindful for breathing in and our breathing out. At the beginning of the breathing in, all to the end of the breathing in, and the same for the breathing out. We ground ourselves in the present moment. through attention to the breathing. And we can just enjoy having this time and space for us with our breathing. You can notice how do we feel inside, our emotions, what is our mind today, kind of ideas are we coming with. And we can just smile to our emotions, to our mind, bring the space for all of us to be here. Breathing in, I smile. Breathing out, enjoy being here. Breathing in, smile. Breathing out, I bring joy. And feel joy inside. Can cultivate joy. And gratitude for this space. Breathing in, I can feel happiness. Breathing out, happiness. Can just stay a few more breaths with that feeling. We can try to keep that kind of energy during this time we have together. Enjoy it and make the best of it. Thank you. You can relax, move a little bit as you like, and we will start the presentation. Okay, I guess you can see my screen. Good. Okay, so here's the agenda for today. So first I will talk about inner well-being. Then we'll talk about the link between inner well-being and how to bring that in education for sustainability. And to finally end with some considerations for implementation. And at the middle of this presentation, we'll have also a working group for you to discuss in pairs on that. Okay, so let's start with inner well-being. So first, I think it's important to acknowledge that well-being is an inner state, right? It's something that we experience within ourselves. So well-being is somehow always an inner state. And the question is, what conditions are can generate, this well-being? Whether we should look for external conditions or whether these are mainly internal. And that brings us back to this distinction in ancient Greece about two visions of happiness and well-being. The first one being called hedonia, It's a search for pleasure, enjoyment, and comfort. And often is to be found a little bit more outside oneself, right? Enjoyment, we'll see, that, the capacity for enjoyment is a great inner capacity, but often hedonia is more associated to searching pleasure outside of ourselves in external material conditions. And it is often set against another vision of well-being, which Greeks have called eudaimonia. And this can be synthesized in these definitions: the states and or pursuits associated with using and developing the best in oneself. We often talk about excellence and virtues in accordance with one's true selves and one deeper principles. So and we see that this is really about what kind of capacities, inner capacities, we can develop within ourselves. And I very like this definition, which closely echoes the definition I give to being, which is I talk about our highest being, so the best in oneself, and our truest being, becoming who we are. So we have these two notions somehow embedded in this notion of eudaimonia. And what is interesting is that research shows that, so now we have a happiness science, right? A human flourishing science that I will often refer to in this presentation. And so we have research that can tell us, what are the conditions for happiness, and also, how happiness is important for sustainability, which I will develop in this masterclass. So research shows that both orientations, can lead to happiness. So we have some people who have a more hedonic orientation to happiness, and it can work. And we have people who have more eudaimonic orientation towards happiness, and it can work. But what the research tells also is that for oneself, eudaimonia seems a better and more sustainable on the long-term approach to happiness. And also one thing that is very important is that happiness research have shown that happy people have more positive attitudes and behaviors towards other and nature. So that's why happiness is so important for sustainability. We see that happy people can have more sustainable lifestyle, attitudes, behaviors. But it's not all the happy people. It's those that have a eudaimonic orientation towards happiness. So obviously, if we are looking for pleasure and consumptions, for example, this is not very sustainable. But if we are building our happiness on our inner life, this is a great basis for sustainability, as we will see. And indeed, there is at the same time a recognition that these inner capacities, or inner qualities, we call them sometimes transformative qualities and skills. There is the recent recognition that we can develop, through this eudaimonic approach. There is a recent recognition of their importance for sustainability. And here we have the framework of the Inner Development Goals, which is a recent initiative. I think this framework has been published last year. And based on the actual science, they have identified 23 of these transformative qualities and skills that they have clustered in 5 different categories, which have an important role to play to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, right? So the first one is being, relationship to self. So, being able to follow our inner compass, being open, self-aware, having presence, etc. The second one is thinking, that, we know we need more systemic thinking, more wisdom in how we think. So for sustainability. The third one is relating, and I think that's the core of it, because if we don't care for others and the world, we will probably not take actions to deal with our social and environmental challenges. The fourth one is collaborating, because we know it takes a lot of collaboration to transform our societies. And the final one is action. And we know that it's not always easy when you work on that field. You need a lot of perseverance in particular, but also courage, creativity, and optimism. So all these, are human qualities and skills to nourish for sustainability. I'm getting back to this well-being agenda in particular, and we have identified also some keys and some qualities for happier living. These are the 10 keys from the Action for Happiness initiative, which is based on this science for this happiness science. And they have identified something that can make us happier, like do kind things to others. There have been research that shows, how much it makes us feel good. Connecting with people, I think that's maybe the most important one, showed by science how important are relationships for happiness and importance to take care of them. Having a healthy lifestyle, living mindfully, always be creative and keep learning new things, having some direction, some goals to follow, having the resilience in case of when difficult things happen in our lives, being able to deal with them and find ways to bounce back, being able to cultivate positive emotions, really focus on the good things in our life, for example, and savoring when we have good feelings happening, acceptance, being comfortable with who we are, and meaning, be part of something bigger. But I would say the happiness science has also highlighted some others that I've mentioned in the slides here. I would like to emphasize
death
gratitude.
and destruction in a
Okay.
specific locality.
Mhm.
Now, if I put
If you
the
can
base there, I will
hear someone
prevent
speaking,
this
maybe
clause from becoming
Witness Salemi. Thank you. So we have others here. I would say gratitude to me. I would like to underline that, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But also, I would say in general, this commitment to personal growth, because that's what makes us all of this at the end is not so much about external conditions, is a way of being that we can learn and that we can develop through practice. So that's what I would like to emphasize. And I like to share some teachings on inner well-being. Did I came out of my screen? Can you see? Yeah, I came out. Okay, I wanted to.
Yeah,
that's fine. I thought I wanted to look at some notes, but not a problem. I will do without. So Thich Nhat Hanh teaching on inner well-being. This is, important basis for me that I wanted to share with you. So Thich Nhat Hanh was a Vietnamese monk. He died in 2022. The day indeed my book was released, and he has been a Buddhist monk. Coming from Vietnam, he had to go out of the country and was promoting peace in the US, in Europe, etc. And he finally settled down in France, and is considered one of the most influential spiritual leader contemporary. And he is known also sometimes as the father of mindfulness. So he's the first one to coin this term, mindfulness, from trying to find a word from some translation from the Chinese. And all of his teaching has been on mindfulness. So which mindfulness being aware of what's happening outside of us in our environment, but also inside of us in terms of our ideas, of our emotions, what's happening in our body. And being for that, we need to be in the here and now. And we need to have a non-judgmental attitude to be able to be with what is with one another. And that is really the gateway to be fully there and connect more deeply with one another, with oneself, and with nature. And Thich Nhat Hanh is also famous because he kind of reframed, I mean, his endeavor was really to make Buddhism relevant again to the challenge of the present times. And he modernized some of the teachings and reframed the Buddhist teaching on suffering. And sometimes we talk about the end of suffering. And he reframed that in terms of happiness. So just to be very clear, that spiritual development is not different from happiness, which is the ultimate goal, let's say, in you could say in Buddhism. And he was also doing a lot of these calligraphy that I will use as a Zen way, I would say, to synthesize the main insights of his teachings and Buddhism. So here we have one. Mindfulness is a source of happiness, and we will see why is that. So this first teaching is no suffering, no happiness. So it looks a bit surprising, but you know, all these dualistic notions somehow just realize that they kind of complement each other. They need one another to be. Without suffering, we would not be able to appreciate life and be happy. And that's the first the main teaching of the Buddha was the first noble truth is the fact that there is suffering in the world, and often we don't want to see our own suffering. We rather want to put it under cover. And I think the opening oneself to opening ourselves to our own suffering is really the key indeed to spiritual path. And I would say that's also the key for sustainability, because if we don't want to see our own suffering, we can't deal with it because we feel we can't deal with it, we will not take actions for the suffering of others. So how to deal? So that's why, knowing how to suffer is very important for our happiness, because, suffering is part of life. And how to suffer means first recognizing our suffering, recognizing that something is wrong right now, and being able to embrace it with our mindfulness, really being fully with it, making a space for it. Say, yeah, I know that you are here, being able eventually to talk to it, and recognizing it and embracing it. And we say embracing it with the light of mindfulness, a bit like a mother, with tenderness, and like a mother embrace a baby. And the baby often, because it feels embraced, may stop crying. It's something that can, this energy can penetrate the body of the baby and really calm this suffering. So that's what we are practicing, being able to embrace our suffering. And why is it important for happiness? So it's part of life. We need to know how to deal with it, and it brings us more alive, because if we cover it, we are not really fully here. We're not really in touch with our life, with what's happening inside of us, but also outside of us. And the suffering also helps us to develop the energy of compassion. Compassion for ourselves, but from getting in touch with our suffering, we can also be in touch with the suffering of others. So that gives us, the capacity to develop the energy of compassion, which is very important for well-being. It helps us to understand, more what brings us suffering, and then there's also what brings well-being to us. And it also helps us then to have some gratitude when we have good conditions, and we can really be happy, let's say, not to have a toothache if we know what is a toothache. Otherwise, we can't realize how good conditions we have right now if we have not suffered in the past. So another teaching, happiness is here and now. Often what brings us suffering is because we live either in the past with what has happened and have left some wounds, for example, or our regrets, or because we think about our projects in the future. And that's a key really teaching. And I can tell you that often when you are dealing with difficulties and not feeling well, maybe feeling overwhelmed, stressed, etc., getting back to the present moment is always a great practice. So yeah, being happiness is here and now. And by the way, the past no longer exists. The future is not yet here. So life is only happening in the here and the now. And that's the best way to take care of the future. I mean, of course, it doesn't mean that we can't think about the past, we can't think about the future, but we have to be mindful when we connect with our past, when we connect with our future. We have to know that we are thinking about the past, we are thinking about the future, and not being carried away into our projects or into what happened to us when we were younger. So yes, happiness is here and now. You have enough. That's another teachings. Just realize when we are in the present moment that we have enough good conditions right now to be happy right now. So it's not about once I will have this job or this partner or this house, I will be happy. No, you won't be happy once you get this house, this partner, this job, because you will always the mind will always want something more. So you have enough to be happy right now, and you have to practice rather gratitude for all the conditions that we have. So in my own experience, for example, I remember at the beginning of the year, this was my main resolution, and my projects I've been working on for a long time are showing some kind of success right now. And I was just asking, then if I don't feel fulfilled and happy, what's the point then? Or even with some I would say a little bit of anxiety, if I'm not really fulfilled with all the good conditions that I have, there may be something wrong. So really yes, important to practice gratitude, which in my experience I think is probably the main attitude or practice that is important for our happiness. And of course, it has an important impact for sustainability, in terms of overconsumption, etc. And finally, just to recap a little bit, this understanding, this Buddhist understanding of the mind, which is, goes somehow in the same direction than scientific findings. And these Buddhist teachings say that we have a mind consciousness of which we are aware of, what's happening in our mind right now. But there is also a kind of unconscious that is called the store consciousness. And in this store consciousness, we have all the different state of mind, qualities, whatever you call it. They call them seeds. So there's some positive seeds of mindfulness, compassion, love, etc. And there are some more negative seeds, sorry, of anger, hate, jealousy, fear, etc. And basically to say that we all have all these seeds, all these possibilities that can come up to our mind consciousness, that can show up in the way we are. And it's all about whatever we cultivate, whatever come out more often in mind consciousness will grow stronger. So it's really the metaphor of the garden, and we are the gardener of our minds. So, and that's, exactly what neuroscience is telling. Neuroscience talks about neural pathways, right? That we are using in our mind, and we can always create neural pathways by thinking, acting differently. But the more we act and think and feel in the same way, the more these neural pathway gets strengthened. And we know that our mind, there's what neuroscientists call the neuroplasticity of the mind. So basically, our mind can evolve in very different ways, and it's all about what we do with it during our life, right? And that's why people, for example, who are practicing a lot, let's say meditation, cultivating the seeds of mindfulness, concentration, compassion, etc., that can show up by images of their brain, right? It really changed literally their physical brain. So this is really, we have to be responsible and knowing that, so it's really seeing ourselves as basically, and in that way, it's very scientific somehow. So we are very conditioned by our what's happening in our mind, but we can take a responsibility for it, and we can take we can commit to a practice in a way that cultivate the good seeds in our mind and rather avoid the bad seeds. So 4 different ways to cultivate them. The first one is when good seeds are coming to the mind consciousness, we need to keep them there for a long time. For example, when the seed of well-being, for example, comes in, we need to savor that. We need to stay with that feeling of well-being, and maybe being grateful for it, etc., so that it can stay longer. The second one is when we have a neutral, let's say, experience. We can turn that neutral experience in something that is a happy moment. So as I said, because I know I was had some physical pain, let's say, last week, etc. Today I don't have, and that seems maybe normal, but I can be just grateful for that. So I turn that moment, which can seem neutral, into a happy moment. And for that, I can, for example, we often take as a practice to smile. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, sometimes I smile because I'm happy, and sometimes I'm happy because I smile. So myself in difficult moments, being able, to smile and to enjoy, savor some present moment, help me to deal with some difficulties in my life. The third one is with our mindfulness, prevent the bad seeds to come up in our mind consciousness. I know that if I'm having this discussion with my wife on this, I know I'll get angry. So maybe it's not the right moment, maybe, and I can choose, what I want to make it happen, because I've developed the understanding of how things go in my mind, and I choose not to go there. Right. And the final one is when these bad things come up, as I said, when suffering come up, for example, or difficult emotions, I know how to recognize them, name them, and embrace them with mindfulness, with compassion. And that allows to bring these bad seeds back into store consciousness. So just to conclude with some, I'd like to also share with you some daily practice. I do have already shared some, but and especially I've developed them in some difficult times, and being aware also condition is my mind. And there's a when I first start the day, there's a funny song in Plum Village. Sometimes they use a childish song, and there's one that says, every morning when I wake up, I am happy. So I'm just telling that to myself to kind of programming my mind, and and often before I start to work, I connect with myself and start with setting the intentions of the day. For me, it's about cultivating mindfulness, cultivating love, joy, and equanimity or peace. For me, I think these are four qualities that are key for my well-being, and also the quality of my days. And during the day also, maybe you have heard it on my computer, because it somehow rings right now every 15 minutes. There is a mindfulness bell which rings and invite me to stop and just connect back to myself. I come back to my breathing. I relax myself. I connect back to my body and relax myself, and I smile. So these are kind of micro practice, but when you repeat them, they are little by little changing your mind and your behaviors. Sometimes when we are absorbed in our work, we forget we have a body. We get very carried out by our thinking, etc. So here is my bell. Maybe you can hear it and can. So that's an opportunity to really develop this capacity to get back to oneself and not being too carried away by your work. So just to conclude this first part of the presentation, here is a graph I took from my book just to explain, that our current system and problems are mainly based on a disconnected and egocentric individual. And there's some psychological literature on that, and they offer it as people who are driven by extrinsic motivation, basically looking for happiness outside of them in terms of money, of fame, power, sometimes often add sex to this. And because people are disconnected from themselves, they are also disconnected from other and nature. And that's why we have this, environmental and social destruction, which is sometimes also reframed as a relationship crisis. And we know that those who are driven by extrinsic motivation, that often is linked to some suffering, or and that also makes them suffer more. And on the other side, science have shown, how important is the connection, as I said, first to other humans or relationships for our well-being. Also to nature. There's a lot of science which shows, how good it is for well-being and also for some human capacity for health to be interacting with nature, and of course to be in touch, truly deeply in touch with oneself. And that's clearly a pathway for sustainability, for happiness, and for wisdom also. And I would say that these three connections goes in the direction of spiritual evolution, and because they are expressing our true spiritual nature, which we have realized recently that at the end, mystics from all different traditions have experienced the same kind of experience. They are putting different names on it: unity consciousness, oneness, interbeing, but they are basically talking about the same kind of experience, which explains that the connection to oneself, nature, and other humans goes together. If you nourish deeper connection to yourself, you'll be more in touch with also with what's around you. And as I said in my past, that connection to nature was also deeply connected to a reconnection with myself. So just to sum up that, but the good news is that we can be both better and more sustainable. Often, if we look at the crisis with our the mainstream understanding of the problem, we would come to the conclusion that we need to consume less and have less, and that would make us less happy, right? But if that's a kind of having more bottom line. But if we realize that we can both, by being more, we can both be more sustainable and happier. So I think that's a very positive narrative, and which is much more inspiring and can have much more traction than what we are right now. So to end up this first part of the presentation, I'd like to invite you to go in pairs in breakout groups and discuss for 10 minutes in total, 5 minutes each, 3 things that you think are key to your inner well-being and how you can cultivate them. So we'll have this breakout for 10 minutes. And then we can see if you can share a little bit, maybe in the chat or maybe even speaking with us a few main insights.
So please click the button join. Let's hope everybody is going to open your camera and be able to join a group.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you have some others coming back. Yeah.
It's good to see the faces of everybody and smiling.
See if that works.
It's really nice to see everyone. Okay, everybody's back. Great.
Okay. Good. So maybe we could take a few minutes to share. I will invite you to put some insights you add in your conversations about, what makes you happy and how you can cultivate it, or in the chat. And if someone also wants to share, I see a hand raised by Rocio. That is very much welcome. Go ahead, Rocio. Or Rocio.
Hi, Thomas. Nice to meet you. I'm Rocio Collantes from NCULA, Panama, an educator too. Nice to meet you, everyone. Hi, Miss Miriam. Hi, Sam. Thank you so much. Well, I have the conversation with my friends. My opinion is that put the ethics and practice for the Earth Charter document, and identity, the pillar 1, describe the respect and save the community, because the people we need love the nature, love the community, love the family. So I identify this. And I expressed too about the songs, because the songs express how to make the protection, the nature, the air planet. I put the example, the song of Michael Jackson is my favorite song, Earth Song, because Earth Song describes the reality in the world, how the people can save the Earth planet, can put the ethics and values about the love, the family, and the wonder community. And this is my point. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Rocio. Thanks for sharing. Wondering if some others would like to chat. I think there are some in the chat. No, not yet. Waverly saying, walk my talk and keeping my energy where my intention is. Doing meditative and being aware of the good seeds. Yeah. Thank you, Waverly. Does anyone wants to also share?
Yeah. Melinda?
Please, Melinda.
Okay. Rocio, I heard you say you're from Panama. Well, I also live in Panama, and I live in Darien, and maybe we'll meet someday face to face. I put down as the 3 keys for me are regular meditation, physical exercise, and work. I want to mention work, not in the sense of it's a source of income necessarily, sustainability, but work in the sense of relating to challenges, to awakening creativity, being able to transform and be transformed at the same thing by participating in whatever that work is. So those were the 3 things that I mentioned, and as well in how to cultivate them. It all has to do with time, not in the sense of time management, but more like the rhythm of our living, and then the continuing to grow in awareness, which is like the what holds it all together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Beautiful. Okay, let's see if someone else like to jump in, or we'll start sharing my screen. Quality food, indeed. We are what we eat. Thank you. And Katrine. Okay, I'll go back to the presentation then. Okay, so now let's we have talked about inner well-being. Now let's see what this means in terms of education for sustainability. And I wanted to offer this general framework about on the one side, you know, in red, we have type of education strategies and going toward the more transformative and holistic. So the first one are very, you know, let's say the first level is specific training. The second level is about how do we mainstream that in the education system. And the third level is that how do we make, you know, how do we take into account that all of our societies all of our institution is an education context. We are, you know, we are being framed, and our happiness depend on all, our inner well-being depend on all our institutions of societies. That's on the one side, and on the other side in yellow, between the type of skills. So let's say the first column is focused on well-being per se, and the second column on the right acknowledge that well-being is about a lot about inner development, inner well-being. So which I think is more transformative and more and a more holistic approach again. So I won't go too much. I think it's the first line. Well-being skills learning is fairly clear. You know, I mentioned, you know, these what is important for our well-being, and we can be taught about these skills. And but then it's really a matter of practicing, and we have seen that somehow it's a way of being, it's a way of life, and it relates that we need to transform ourselves, so that it relates to inner development, let's say, to practice these well-being skills. And for example, mindfulness, as I mentioned, is a key practice to cultivate all these well-being skills. So I think this first line is very straightforward. So I will go then to what it means for education systems. So and here I would what I would advocate for is an education for being. But before explaining what I mean, what is often how to teach pupils to cultivate well-being, resilience, positive functioning, along with more academic aspects of education, is often called positive education. So it's the first relevant approach I mentioned here in the slide, positive education. And this is getting a lot of traction, a lot of attention. It's basically based on the happiness science and how do we bring that into education. And this is very important for two reasons. First is because we have seen a strong increase of mental health issues among young people, among pupils. So there's a mental health crisis that we need to address in schools. And the second reason is that research has shown that by cultivating these well-being skills, happiness, resilience, etc., students are not only better, but they are also getting better academic achievements. So instead of, sometimes we fear that we will lose time dedicated to learning if we focus on these, let's say, character education, etc., learning these skills, social, emotional learning. It's a lot about that. But the reality is the contrary, that if we are well, if we are less stressed, we are learning much better. So positive education, I think, is really showing great results. There are, for example, evidence, life skills training, which has been deployed in the US for the last 20 years. It has shown a decrease of 45% in substance abuse 6 years after the end of the program. So this is really long-lasting results for pupils who go through this life skills training in terms of substance abuse and their own well-being. Another one is a bullying prevention program, which was initially developed in Norway and later on has spread to many other countries and has managed to cut by half the number of aggressions, right? So these approaches are really working in terms of improving well-being of students, of children, but also in terms of academic achievements. So that's, when we translate happiness science into education, we often come with this positive education framework. But I'd like to acknowledge, getting a more holistic approach to that, what I call education for being, which to me supports the pupils' integral development, not only of their brain and knowledge, but the expression of their authentic being in all its dimensions, and the cultivation of the best version of themselves. And I think, this will become more and more relevant. Here I have a graph which comes from a research by the initiative called WISE in 2014, to ask experts of education what will be the highly valued skills in 2030, what will be the most important skills, and personal skills come first. And just before practical skill and much before academic knowledge. And there's some very good reason for that, and these reasons that will stay. First is that knowledge is quickly accessible, is changing very often, so it will change throughout our life, and also artificial intelligence is also redefining the kind of human values that we can bring. Because when education was about filling our brain with knowledge, right now, this knowledge is often available directly to artificial intelligence. So it's more about, how we learn to learn, how we are aware, of what's happening in our mind, how we are able, in particular, to connect and collaborate with people, and all these kind of character skills that will or life skills that we stay with us during all our life and help us to evolve and go through all the challenges of our life. So so that's really I think there's a really strong rationale for education of being in terms of what's relevant for society, but also what's important for our own well-being and fulfillment as individuals. And we see a lot of new approaches in education that are going in that way, and like personalized educational curricula. So more and more we have a personalized approach to education. It's about the teacher is rather here to support the pupils in his or own learning path. Cooperative learning. Often school has been very competitive environment, but it has been shown that when pupils help each other to learn, they learn better, and they also develop important collaborative skills. Topic-based teachings. This is about developing a more systemic kind of thinking, because often we have learned things in a very unconnected manner. We learn about biology in some class, about history in another, about mathematics in another one, literature, etc. But it's not because these knowledge are unconnected. It doesn't really help us develop a proper understanding of the world. So topic-based teaching is rather you take a topic and that cuts across, and you bring all relevant teachings to understand this topic. Nature-based learning has been shown also to function very well. Arts and sports, which are very important, and also it has been shown that they help with better academic achievements. They result also in better academic achievements. Service learning, I would say, especially in higher education, especially in with people that are more privileged, the importance of having an experience to serve the community and to learn from that experience is very important. And a good reason why all these, I think all these approaches are working very well, and they are actually part of what is often referred as an example of education system, which is the Finnish education system, where you find all of this to a great extent. And I mentioned here also the Folkbildung, which is can translate as what popular kind of bringing popular bring culture to many people. Culture are the way
Sí, ¿llegó la gente o no?
to enrich oneself and connect more deeply with oneself. So there have been this experience in Nordic countries in the second half of the 19th century, in the first half of the 20th century, and which somehow 10% of a generation has gone to these places where they have lived together for some times and learned practical skills, but at the same time, having these deep conversations among themselves, being exposed to poetry, art, etc. So they are really inspired. And it has been argued that the cultural development of these Nordic countries, which are probably the most advanced culturally in the world, and they are the ones that perform best in terms of many social indicators, can be associated to this huge effort on inner development at scale. So, and I think that's what we need to bring into our education systems. So now I will go on to the next line, if you remember well. So that's the education system, but all of our life is somehow an educative process. So and our well-being not only depends on our education systems, it depends of all of societies on the one side, and of ourselves as individuals to be able, to develop these inner skills. So how can we organize, societies to for well-being instead than economic growth? And this has been proposed. You may have heard about, the gross national happiness that has been developed by Bhutan. And they have actually proposed it as a new development to make happiness a new development paradigm. When we were discussing, in before 2015, what would become the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, Bhutan was proposing that we would make happiness, or the main collective goals. And right now we have a lot of different initiatives working on that. One of them, a very prominent one, is a Well-being Economic Alliance, of which there is even part of it which are where some governments collaborate together to advance this agenda. Governments of Finland, Scotland, Wales, Canada, New Zealand, Iceland. I think they are all the 6, and they are really committed to a well-being economy, which means basically put our efforts, all society efforts towards well-being. And the happiness science can tell us also how to cultivate it, how to cultivate well-being through our institutions. So, before I talked about how we can cultivate it as individuals through developing these inner well-being skills and practice, but also, how can we organize societies so that it serves the well-being of all. So some key recommendations, is the focus on childhood, because, much of our well-being as adults depends on, what happens to us in our childhood. So how can we cultivate that? Maybe, giving more parental leaves, for example, to parents. In Sweden, parents receive up to 18 months of, well-paid parental leaves. In the US, there is no federal policy on parental leave. And we know that makes a huge difference in terms of developing what psychologists call secured attachment, which is a basis for own well-being, but also for our positive contribution to society. And that's why it's a good investment for society to invest in childhood well-being. Mental health is a very important priority. It's a big problem. We have treatments that work relatively well, but there's very low access to treatment. So it's just, I think these two, the underinvestments in these two areas to me is just not understandable from a scientific perspective, doesn't make sense. And I think it's just a reflection of how foreign is this reflection on inner well-being, on the inner side to our societies. But when we come to open up to the data, we will see that it makes a huge sense to invest in these areas. Inequalities are very detrimental to well-being, the importance of public services, of employment, and as I said, also to help people develop these happiness skills at an individual level. But if we, what I propose myself in my book is to take even a more holistic perspective to just recognizing that basically we could say that well-being is above all inner well-being, and it relates to our own inner development. So the politics of being is, there is a quote here that says, aims at aligning our institutions with our true reason to be here on earth, becoming who we are, the best and most complete version of ourselves. So it's really about, societies and the government should help us to express, to provide the conditions for us to express our full potential. And here we are talking about not only human beings, but also all beings. So nature rights to be are also very much part of this framework. And this framework, as we said in the beginning, has really found as a foundation this sentence from the Charter: when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more, not having more. Okay, I demand rather than having more, but about being more, not having more. And I would argue, I've started to argue today that even to meet the basic needs of everyone, I think we need to be more, because then we would care, for everyone, would care for sustainability. And I think that's, our own being more can, help us address all our sustainability issues. And so often when we talk about, the cultural evolution, sometimes from a spiritual perspective, the chapter talks about a change of mind and heart. We often take a bottom-up approach, like individuals do their own inner transitions. The term is now quoted in the IPCC, talks about inner transitions. And then, at some point, the society has to evolve because the individuals evolve, right? But my question is more, okay, how can we organize societies in a way that provides favorable, that embodies this change and that facilitates this change? So how we can organize to provide favorable conditions for being. And the idea is that if we have a deep understanding of what is at stake, we would this will help, develop more fulfilled and wiser individuals that can in turn have the necessary wisdom to adapt and refine institutions. And so we can set up a positive, a virtuous circle. And that, Miriam, you asked me, or you mentioned, the interesting aspect that I was an economist, and I developed this agenda around, well-being, reflection. Actually, my PhD thesis was in ecological economics using an institutional lens approach. And, one of the most famous scholars in institutional analysis, probably the most influential, is Elinor Ostrom, who received in 2009, I think, the Nobel Prize in economics. And basically what she says when she received the Nobel Prize is that the main lesson she has learned about through several decades of research is that often economists have been told that people are selfish, and we need to organize societies in a way that minimize this selfishness somehow, but assuming that they are selfish. And she says that our main learning has been that rather we should design institutions that bring out the best in humans. So there is a strong, a scientific foundation for this agenda. What does that mean? I often use the example of restorative justice. Our current paradigm in justice is often retributive justice. So basically, it's about punishment. So in order to deter individuals to commit crimes and offenses, right? And it doesn't work very well. Our prisons are full, or our justice systems are experiencing a lot of delays. They have high costs, and there's a lot of recidive, yeah. So it doesn't reoffending, so it doesn't work really well. And on the contrary, restorative justice takes a completely different approach, and it brings together the offender and the victims, together with some people of the community, to have a very deep sharing about what happened, about the harm that have been caused, in order to generate consciousness, generate healing within the offenders and the victim. And it works, very well. Offenders and victims are very happy about these processes. It's much less costly. It goes much faster. And in terms of reoffending, it's at least not worse, but probably better than retributive justice. But the main point is that while we are practicing justice, and it could be another aspect of society, we are at the same time developing the human qualities. So all the peoples involved in that process, instead of feeding, their seeds of retaliation, we are feeding their seeds of understanding, presence, responsibility, healing, compassion, etc. So that's why I say institutions should not only deliver results in their own fields in terms of justice, because if we deliver a result based on the wrong paradigm, we're just strengthening the root cause of our problem, which is this mindset of separation. And it has been argued that our cultures are framed around narrative, and the modern narratives has been called sometimes a story of separation, where we feel we assume that we are all selfish. There is no really this world is only purely matter, and there is not really meaning into it, and we are separate from another, from nature. And so the point of society is more about mastering nature to fulfill our material desires, having. And I think this story is now starting to change, including through new scientific understanding of the world and human beings and society, and which is bringing to a new story that has been called the story of interbeing. And actually, this evolution, this cultural evolution that we need, and that the politics of being can help deliver, is already coherent with the cultural evolution that have been observed already in developed countries over the last decades through the work of Ronald Inglehart, which is the most recognized scientist in that field, managing the World Value Survey. And he has showed that we are moving in these rich countries from materialism to post-materialism, and more generally from survival values to self-expression value, which I think are not equal, but going into the direction of being, expressing who we are and the best version of ourselves. So I was looking for the politics of being. I was looking, where are the seeds of this new development paradigm? And I found it in new fields of research and action that I've mentioned, in the left column. The first one is, the people in systemic complexity integral thinking. The second one is, I call it life, but it's about the regeneration movement is about applying life's principles to how we organize society, right? Working with life and not against life, as in the case of agroecology, for example. The science of happiness that I've very much referred to today. Love. I mentioned, the importance of parenting, for example, or restorative justice. Peace, a culture of peace, very important for where you are in Costa Rica at the University of Peace, right? And this has been, you have been UN resolution on that, etc. Mindfulness, freedom, and the interesting thing that all of these are kind of set up as new paradigms sometimes. But I think they all, and I show in my book, how they fundamentally relate to being and inner development. And if we bring them together in a coherent narrative, we have actually a new development agenda, new priorities for policies, for political actions. And and these are based, and I show in my book, based on existing examples. I'm just looking at what is already existing at this stage and is working. So the politics of being is very, is very deep, very inspirational, but it can be also very concrete and actionable. Now I will have to conclude this presentation very quickly. I will give some considerations for implementation based on my work with the United Nations Development Programme on the Conscious Food Systems Alliance. So the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, we have it has been launched a year ago after 2 years of incubation, and it's really to support people from across food and agriculture systems to cultivate the inner capacities that activate systemic change and regeneration. And we are basically a community of practice and learning, and at the same time we have an incubator for intervention. And we want to bring legitimacy for this agenda to show how the work on inner capacities, or which includes inner well-being, can be important, can trigger and support sustainability efforts. So I'll go quickly on that. We're talking about consciousness approaches. Some of them are contemplative practices, such as mindfulness, but also more psychological practices, or the way we convene in groups, nonviolent communications, etc. And we apply them at 3 levels: at the individual level, often through training; at the group level, through how do we convene; and also at the institutional level, in order to change, the the cultures of organizations, but also, have the right policy that support this change. And we're talking about a change in connection and relationship with self, others, and nature that we think are important to build regenerative food systems. And we have identified some principles for interventions that we want to develop. The first one is that they need to be really adapted to the context, really relevant from culturally, being sensitive about the cultural context, showing respect for also traditional wisdom of the place, being sensitive to power dynamics, work with a variety of consciousness practices and approaches, recognize the importance in many contexts to come with evidence-based approaches, but also recognize the plurality of knowledge, in particular, the knowledge of traditional communities, indigenous communities. And finally, I think the most important one is, how to show respect and equity. And I have this sentence here, and where we say, the application of consciousness practices and approaches must respect everyone's own path of evolution and not treat people as objects to be changed. Rather, COFSA offers a tool to support greater individual and collective awareness and flourishing, trusting, based on the emerging science, that these interventions will ultimately support systemic transformations towards regenerative food systems. So we don't just want to make sure we are not forcing people to change so that we can have more sustainability, but giving them just a tool for greater awareness and flourishing, and we trust that this will bring them on a path towards more sustainability. Last slide to conclude. So I think I've shown how real sustainable well-being is a way of being and relates to inner development, and that inner development is key for sustainability. And I think this is because our well-being is not separated. We are not separating from the well-being of others and the planet. We have seen different inner well-being education strategies for sustainability are available. And I think we need to work at different levels, at the level of individuals, groups, and institutions. The importance of building community, of peer support, that's, through deep conversation, that's how change can happen. And it's very meaningful to have some people with us in this process. And finally, respect everyone's own path of transformation. So thank you very much. And we may still have a few minutes for questions and answers. Thank you.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much. It's really nice, wonderful to hear you. I really was present. As at the beginning of this session, it was about mindfulness and being present. And certainly I was present here to every word I heard from you. I would start by giving a comment, and we're going to open the floor for a few comments and questions. But I would like first to bring the voice, your voice that really resonated a lot with me, which is what you said about you would advocate for an education for being, or for being, cultivating the being and the well-being. So certainly that resonated a lot with me and the work we have been doing here. We just never articulated that through those words in a very loud way. But I think we have been articulating that in how we envision the Earth pedagogy and the way in which we want to bring the Earth as an educational tool. So that's really, I'm just saying this because I want to emphasize what you just said and show how much I think we are reflecting on one another. I love what you said, and I would, from the outset, said like to join efforts here in advocating for this notion of being more, investing in the being, in an education for the being. I heard a few people here wrote in the chat box, and I just want to bring their voice. One was, I think it was Anne-Catherine, that I know it was Maria Chus, Maria Seguini, who said, practice gratitude, maybe keep a journal and write down 3 things that we are grateful for. So she shared with us in the chat box. And then Maria Vilches, who had a chat with Mariko Suka, who said health, peace, and meaningful relationships are essential. I think this was something that came from their conversation. She wrote down immersion in nature, creative visualizations, and mindfulness are ways to achieve this. So I just wanted to bring their voice here. Before, when we were still having that sort of moment after the break, I saw that Michael Bracken wanted to speak. I don't know if Michael is still here. Let me see. And he didn't have a chance to speak. But in the meantime, I saw Amanda had your hand up when I started to take the floor. So let me give you the floor, and I'll open the floor for anyone who would like to make a comment or question who haven't had yet the chance to speak. So Amanda.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, Thomas. Thomas and I were able to talk about this a little in the breakout group, but I just wanted to say thank you because I've had this big question for a while in my mind. So how do you reconcile being here in the present with all these worries we have about future generations, about people who are suffering from inequality close to us and in other countries? So like the more you learn, the more I worry. So I didn't think that this question was going to be answered through this masterclass, but it actually was a lot. So I wanted to say thank you to Thomas and see if you have anything else to add on this question, which I'm sure a lot of us who are joining today have been thinking about.
Sure, thank you very much, Amanda. Indeed, I think that's a very important question for many of us, as we see, you know, the state of the world situation worsening, and we see a lot of sustainability change agents that are getting burned out, right? So because they are, you know, I relate to the teaching I've shared earlier about, you know, cultivating the good seeds in our mind. We can't, if we feed our minds with only fear and despair, etc., we will get burned out. You know, it's just as simple as that. So we have to acknowledge, you know, how much we can, you know, be with that information, and definitely choose at sometimes to regenerate ourselves and shifting our attentions to more positive aspects of, you know, of life, of our lives, and even what's happening in the world. Otherwise, we will get burned out, and it's not, you know, if you want to be useful, you first need to take care of yourself, because you will not be useful, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't, you know, a lot of people don't let this information in because they are just so afraid of it, because they feel they don't have the capacity to handle it. That's why, you know, some people deny the climate crisis, etc. So if they see, you know, Susan open up to this information, if they see that, you know, they are getting burnout, it probably does not invite them to open up, right? So I think that's the first very important teaching. The second one I would say is just to recognize that at the moment, I think the worst and the best are competing. You know, the story of separation, the story of interbeing, these two different paradigms are competing with one another. So just to understand that, yes, there are some very bad futures likely for us, but there are also some brighter futures possible. And they may not be, they may not come, they may not manifest, and if we would not be threatened, you know, often like individuals, you know, people don't change if they are not threatened, and I don't think we would make that kind of cultural evolution, which I think is even of a spiritual nature, if we would not threaten to change and really, you know, look deeper into the roots of our problem and establish a much greater basis for civilizational development, which is what I advocate with politics of being. And a third part of the answer, I think, is about the teaching on what we call historical reality an absolute reality in Buddhism somehow, which, you know, yes, it's terrible what's happening.
Thomas, can you repeat that about the
between our historical reality and ultimate reality? Sorry, that's a better word.
Historical reality and ultimate reality.
Ultimate reality. So I will explain what I mean. So historical reality, yes, it's terrible what's happening to life on Earth, to many human beings, etc. And that's it's called historical reality, and we need to act for that. But at the same time, you know, if we are only stuck into that, we will not have. We will be only reacting often to that. We don't find the freedom to act in a wiser way. And ultimate reality would be to understand that life on Earth has gone already through many crises that have led to a lot of to great extinctions, and that at some point, you know, life on Earth will, at some point, this planet will also disappear, and all the life on it together with that. So you know, this will happen at some time. So that can give us this insight, can free us about, you know, with some fears, and can give us the necessary some kind of detachment that is needed to act in a wiser way. So I think we need to be able to switch from time to time to one or the other vision of the world. We need to look at the historical reality, look at the suffering, and be able to act in response to that. But we need also to be that our actions or thinking is not so much conditioned by that you know, understanding of reality. We need to find the freedom in looking through more in a deeper way to what is happening, and there we can find peace in this process.
Thank you. We still have a few minutes, so I'd like to again encourage any one of you who would like to make a comment or anything that stands out that really still striking you from this session before we close, or ask a question to Thomas. You can just raise your hand. I'll give you the floor. Raveli, Anne-Catherine, Sam. Raveli.
Thomas, it was a great masterclass. Thank you so much. And while you're talking, I could see a lot of connections of what you're talking with Active Hope, Joanna Macy's way of doing education. Could you highlight those connections a little bit more?
Sure, thank you, Wabali. It's a pleasure to answer this question. And I actually sent my book. I was about to send my book to Joanna Macy when she finally said it was. She first agreed, but then it was too late because she could not read any more written books. So yes, I mean, Joanna Macy has also had Thich Nhat Hanh as an important teacher for her. So the way, you know, how we can transform suffering, especially by coming together with an open heart and, you know, showing as human beings that suffer, that are being moved by what's happening. She shows how that can be a great lever for transformation of ourselves and of the world together. So, and she has said recently that, you know, it's an incredible time for being alive. So I think she remained very hopeful and very positive because she believed that's, you know, our task right now is this cultural, spiritual evolution. So yeah, I've not gone so deep in her work, but let's say it's very much part of my environment and wisdom. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? One or two last one. If you want to make a comment. Everybody's shy, thinking. Okay, so I would then invite everybody to take this moment for a few minutes of smiling. I smile because I'm happy, and I'm happy because I smile. We stay with that and use this moment as a silent moment to express and be mindful of the energy that we take in and the energy that we deliver. So with this, I would like to end with a celebratory note, with a note of gratitude, and also with this greatest, at least in my takeaway, of being really mindful of what we take in and what we give in the good energy that we can bring in to a space. Thomas, my deepest gratitude, not only for this session, but also for everything that you're bringing to this world. My gratitude to the book, to the connection you've made of your book, your work with the Earth Charter. Also grateful for the podcast. We have a great podcast with you that will stay. And thank you everyone for joining us today, for being here. In a month from now, we have our masterclass of next month with Mary Evelyn Tucker. You're all invited to attend. Thank you so much and all the best. Thomas, a big hug from Costa Rica all the way to where you are.